Chuckleinik. I'm a reenactor. That means I'm going to dress up funny in weird clothes from different time periods and try to bring the past to life. And for 36 years in the classroom, that's what I did. Well, now I'm a free agent, and I still have a whole bunch of garb at home that fills one room. I still have a passion for bringing the past to life. That's kind of why you do living history. And a desire to preserve landmarks, because I've seen landmarks go away. And so what I'm doing now is a very weird, very pretentious sounding Mission Odyssey. It's sort of my personal pilgrimage to visit each of these historic sites that are associated with the mission period and some of the stuff that'll follow. So the missions, the Estancias, spin-off missions, the Estancias, those are the ranchos, the presidios, those are the fortifications, and anything that just happens to catch my fancy. And I intend to visit each of these places in garb and tell the stories of these places and to document the experiences. And so what I'm doing today is, because I talk too much, I'm on a return journey to Mission San Miguel Arcángel to try to finish the story. I hope you'll stick with me. This time I wanted to take a look at how productive a mission could be. And so I decided to explore the boundaries of the mission's allotted lands going north, west, south, and east, since much of it's still in agricultural use, or at least not paved over. One of the things you have to keep in mind is that these missions were supposed to be productive. There were industries and crafts were to be taught to the neophytes, because this was to kind of wean them into Spanish culture. And when the mission quadrangle was completed, there were I think it was 500 feet on a side, there were various workshops that were built in. And so there would be a candle making workshop and tallow making area. There would be areas for drying the hides of the cattle that were being raised. There was spots for carpenters and weavers, but it wasn't just simply having the neophytes do things. If the missions could get outside talent, they brought it in. And there was an argument, kind of an argument. The Padre at Mission San Luis Obispo wanted to bring in an Irishman who was a prisoner over at Monterey at the Presidio, and he figured that maybe he could get paroled over to Mission San Luis Obispo, because it turns out he was a weaver. Well, instead, Padre Cabot made a pretty good plea, and the weaver was sent here to Mission San Miguel, which led to another letter from the Padre at Mission San Luis Obispo complaining bitterly about this. Mariners would wash up on the shores of Alta California, and as long as they were few in number, that was okay, because those who did show up often brought talents with them that would be useful to the government in Alta California and useful to the missions. There was also a carpenter that was brought in, and again it was the same situation. Someone who had jumped ship in Monterey, and he ended up coming down to live at Mission San Miguel, and he ran one of the workshops and worked with the neophytes. The major domo in 1828 and for a little bit past that was also another man who showed up on the shores of Alta California, and he ended up here running the mission for the Padres. Hundreds of Migueleños grew crops and cared for the vineyards. Over the years, San Miguel produced 92,000 bushels of wheat, barley, corn, beans, and peas. Olive trees were planted, and there was an olive press that stood in the plaza, as well as a grist mill. There was a large orchard to the east of the Mission quadrangle where many types of fruit were grown. San Miguel had a sizable livestock herd. In the peak year of 1821, the mission had over 9,000 head of cattle. The California missions had the first cattle brands of California, and each had its own brand. San Miguel had the numeral 3 with an elongated top. This 3 symbolized the Holy Trinity. Slips of thorny brush, known as dahlia, were carried in from the Nacimiento area and were planted in a circle below the spring. This planting formed a living corral for the sheep, too thick for the sheep to escape through, and no maintenance required. According to one source, the Migueleños brought the sheep in through a gate into the quadrangle for shearing. Apparently 13,000 head of sheep at one time, which might have made for some sleepy neophytes. So the attempt at the Rancheria Bubal was a failure as far as developing an asistencia, or a submission of Mission San Miguel. But that didn't stop the Padres from developing estancias or stations throughout their area of, remember, they controlled 18 miles to the north of the mission, 18 miles to the south of the mission. And they had some considerable territory, so a number of estancias were developed, and on these estancias were built either adobe or stone structures, and there was increasing profit for the mission. Okay, so it's not 18 miles away. We turn our attention to the seashore 35 miles away to the west. In 1810, the Padres set up their very first estancia, or rancho, for Mission San Miguel Arcángel, and it was on the coast, and it went by a couple of different names. Rancho La Playa or Rancho San Simeon. And Padre Cabot had written that because of the mountainous terrain between Mission San Miguel and what he considered to be usable land, they basically decided they would build an adobe structure. They would be basically on the coast. And here they raised about 800 cattle, and they had horses for breeding purposes. But there was one other little feature. A road got built between this bay and the mission, and part of that was because there was smuggling taking place. Remember, the territory that's supposed to be controlled by Mission San Miguel Arcángel, 18 miles to the north, 18 miles to the south of the mission, to the sea, 18 miles to the east. And actually, it's not 18 miles, it's 7 Spanish leagues. And currently I'm at the northernmost extent, 7 Spanish leagues away from Mission San Miguel. I'm standing on the ground of Rancho San Bartolome, or it was sometimes called Pleito, and Pleyto. And remember, this is about raising cattle. All right? And that's what the estancias were for. 2 years later, the estancia Rancho Asuncion was established 7 Spanish leagues south of the mission, and it's basically just north of what's Atascadero today. The year after that, there would be another estancia established at, Rancho El Paso de Robles, and part of the reasoning there was they wanted to take advantage of the hot springs that were there. Those hot springs are going to be showing up throughout the story of this mission and the area. About those hot springs, the mission took advantage of them. They built an estancia basically around them to kind of incorporate them into the system, and people were coming for the healing properties. Okay. There was a source I read that gave Padre Juan Cabot El Marinero, the mariner, credit for figuring this out, that this was going to be beneficial, and that it took a European to explain to the Salinan, hey, this warm water is really good for you. And I was incensed at how Eurocentric it was. And as far as, here are people who are hunters and gatherers who know the land and know the properties of the land, and they could find food where Europeans would starve, and yet they supposedly didn't know that the waters were beneficial. Well, there'll be more of the hot springs later. Now, about 1.5 Spanish leagues northeast of the mission, in 1814, another rancho or another estancia was established, and that was Rancho del Aguaje. And it was a vineyard that was like about 22 acres of land, and it had an adobe structure that was built with a couple of rooms, and there was like a roofed portico on it. This was to basically house the vintner. So the estancias were actually specializing in what they grew. Okay, it's not 18 miles or 7 leagues. Mission San Miguel was said to be bounded on the east by the Tulares, who were 66 miles distant. Another facet of how recruitment was going is in 1815, there were a couple of large expeditions that were mounted. One was from Monterey, the Presidio, and this was to go inland, went through the San Juan Bautista area, and they were to track down runaways. And this was a very expensive, and also it starts to become very dangerous expedition. And at the end of one of them, which actually ended up by Lake Buenaventura, they brought back a grand total of 9 runaways. There was the point. They were tracking down those people who did not want to be a part of the mission system and bringing them back by force. From November 4th through the 15th in 1815, Padre Cabot accompanied this expedition led by Juan de Ortega. A third exploration of the Tulare country was made in 1818, although the mission Padre Martin longed for was never formed in the San Joaquin Valley. A significant number of Tulareños were baptized at Mission San Miguel. In the 1820s, the tone of the expeditions had changed. They were deemed successful in that a number of hostile Indians were killed, many tribes were intimidated, neophytes were returned, and many stolen horses were reclaimed. Well, I really shouldn't be surprised. I talk too much, so I'm going to have to come back to Mission Miguel Arcángel. I hope you stick with me.